If anyone has an ear, let him hear.
Three, two, one.
This is a Penguinati production. This is an old video that I found. Disclaimer, these are the teachings that I follow, and I haven't been able to debunk this theory for over 10 years. And this is what me and Dale Dufay discovered. So I'm giving myself credit for the discoveries that we made together that I never got credit for. And this is how we discovered the multiverse 10 years ago. This is when we discovered we both came from different Earths. And also in how we discovered the answers to the Mandela effect. Potentially. These are only possible answers.
Welcome to TERRAS of the Milky Way. My name is Dale Dufay. You could see variations and differences. You could see variations and differences in Australia. I know I did. That's what catches my eye. You develop like a photographic memory after you experience the Mandela effect, because we're obviously shifting into replica versions of ourselves that always existed in these other realities, where this replica version of yourself has always been here.
Truly, like my safe, predictable world was shattered. If you're experiencing it, it can just break down something inside of you, and it can be very much a traumatic event. I've heard some of our fellow affected call it falling down the rabbit hole, such as Alice in Wonderland did. And once down the rabbit hole, things only become more and more strange.
Welcome to the Mandela effect. Here we go, down the rabbit hole.
It's quite obvious the Mandela effect is showing us this, but you can't help but notice the variations and differences.
Notice that we never use the word changes, because nothing is changing.
In many areas. I mean, for the most part, these Orion dwarfers are very almost identical, but you can see variations and differences once you develop that photographic memory, which I never really had. I've been still developing it, but I know when I look at something and see something different that I didn't notice before, something drastic, then I know that this is a completely different Earth and a completely different reality that has always existed.
This means if you see differences or changes, that's an indication you're on a different Earth.
That's the important thing to remember and realize, is these realities have always existed. We know this because we were always here. There's fossil records on these Earths like there are on the Sagittarius super Earths, the realities we recall. So these have always been here. There's no denying it. The Mandela effect is not causing these different realities to all of a sudden appear. Life has always been like what the Mandela effect's revealing. Life has always had this parallel existence on a multitude of Earths since the very beginning of creation. Even when these Earths were in Pangea, there was life on them. And every Earth was in Pangea.
The Mandela effect is not new. We just happened to find out about it. We knew this 10 years ago.
And it's just, these Orion dwarfers are the closest to Pangea as you can imagine, simply because they're so much smaller. I've recalled the Sagittarius super Earth being around 60-some thousand miles in circumference. Now these dwarfers would make them 24,800 miles in circumference. So the Earth I recall from the reality where this portion of my soul originated is 3 times larger than this one. Now that just proves one thing, that there's a multitude of Earths on the outer reaches of the Sagittarius arm where those Earths are of greater size. So we can only assume they grow. These Earths grow as they age. It makes so much sense. And this Earth is much younger, being closer to the galactic center, which of course is what I believe to be the source of all creation in the Milky Way galaxy. But I believe the Mandela effect is opening our eyes and realizing that the galactic center, for starters, is not a black hole. It's a white hole. It's where all the matter is created. Could you imagine the dynamic energy in there from the huge galaxy that exceeds 250,000 light years across? Even more than that, really. Like I say, they have such a dim view of the galaxy this close to the galactic center. But again, we can, that's what the Mandela effect's showing us, that the Milky Way galaxy is full of Earths with our reality on them, with life on them as we know it. It's just fascinating. But the one thing, that big eureka moment I always like to say that I saw was as these reality shifts occur. Of course, it's not the Earth changing. It's impossible. It's not the coastline.
This is why the Panama Canal has a little twist on it. And this is why South America moved to the right, because the planet is too small. Everything is squashed together.
Of course, it's not the Earth changing. It's impossible. It's impossible. It's changing overnight on even some of these realities in this Orion inner arm. Because the one I recall, the Sagittarius super Earth I recall, had a continent on the North Pole called Arctica.
And to me, it was the northern Arctic continent, not Arctica.
And some people don't remember that in their original reality, or where their soul portion originated from. They don't recall that because it simply doesn't exist in every reality, even the ones out on the outer reaches of the Sagittarius arm. Some of those Earths only have a massive ice cap. But the reality, I recall, that Earth had a continent on the North Pole underneath a massive ice cap. And that continent, again, was Arctica. But here, of course, they have to do it because of that quantum entanglement. I'd like to point out the variations and differences, which helps us realize that we're, yet again, witnessing another reality we've always existed in. That's the really remarkable thing about it. It's as confusing as that sounds. I mean, this reality we've always were here, but we had absolutely no idea. But thanks to the Mandela effect, we now know that we have who knows how many realities in the Milky Way galaxy. And no doubt the galaxies are parallel too. But that's a whole different subject there. I mean, we're trying to keep it within this Milky Way galaxy because there's no doubt, they already agree that there's a potential of being at least 500 billion. That's with the B. Earths or planets in the Milky Way galaxy. So how many of those are Earths? The Mandela effect is letting us,
This is how I found out Jehovah was real and he's the one moving us. My beliefs are not in your Bible.
About it. And some people even remember New Zealand being at the 10 o'clock position.
This is my planet right there.
And again, that just goes to show how many different realities there are out on the outer reaches. That's why, even though we're at all those realities and oblivious to it, we're still, because our soul portions are so independent, the soul portion that you were assigned and born with will always remain with you. We're not blending into the other soul portions. So we could be originating from different, realities out there. That's why you have different recollections. That's why you have different recollections. That's why you have different recollections, even though we're at all of them. I know that's why I kind of stalled a little bit, because it's so difficult to try and put that into words. How do you say that we're at every reality, but we only can recall one? And some of us can, we're only going to recall the reality we originated from, and some of us, even though we're at all of them, are going to have different recollections because we originated from different ones. I mean, so how do you say that? And to make it to where it's somewhat understandable without, that's why I've always said this Mandela effect is, it makes you, the whole vocabulary change. I mean, there's just amazing. Who would have ever thought there was a plural to Earth? That's why TERRAS of the Milky Way. My other channel, they had a subscriber named Jose Martinez, and he totally recalls New Zealand being at the 10 o'clock position over here. Now,
That's me.
the amazing thing about that is, of course, he's in every reality as well, just like I am, but he saw me in his reality that he recalls. He saw me in Denver, Colorado, when I was living out there in the 70s, because that's where he lives. Now, he had no knowledge that I was living out there in the late 70s, early 80s, but yet he said he saw me out there, and I was actually confirmed the date and the area and the situation where he saw me. Of course, I didn't see him, and we didn't introduce each other and this and that, but what the important thing about that revelation is it taught me.
It showed both of us that Deo Dufay came from another Earth. This is how I found out I came from a different Earth.
At that point, years ago, that, wow, I'm actually exist in a reality where New Zealand is at the 10 o'clock position. And a lot of those realities also where New Zealand's at this position in Australia appears to be upside down, even ironically.
Here comes a big clue.
That's where Nelson Mandela perished in prison. Now, I don't recall any reality
This is when he gave me another clue. We came from different Earths. Because his memory is different from mine.
where that happened, but I know I'm in realities that where that did indeed happen. Now, the reality I recall, New Zealand's up at the 2 o'clock position, right about here, way up here. And there's none of these gulfs, very consistent coastline around Australia, and of course the Bight and Tasmania. And it was the furthest point closest to Antarctica in those realities. That's why they call it the land down under. Here they call it that as well, but it's not far from the land down under. South America is. And let's check this reality up in this reality as well. Chile goes all the way to the southern tip of South America. And almost all the other realities that I've experienced, that I've always existed in, Argentina is the southern tip. In fact, Chile doesn't even come anywhere near the tip, but here it comes all the way down. Not only does it come all the way down to the southern tip, so you could clearly see the boundary line, but it also goes to the east coast in the South Atlantic. So there's not many realities where Chile touches the east and west coast, let alone this further, the furthest south country in the entire world, closest to Antarctica. So you can even check it. It's not just because of this peninsula. You can even check the longitude and latitude, and see that it is way by far further south than any.
South America is the land down under.
But that was interesting to know that I'm in a reality that I had no idea. I still don't have any idea that I'm there, but I'm there. And that replica version of myself, regardless of what soul portion of mine's in that replica version, is saying the same thing but in different terms about why that they realize they're in realities where New Zealand's in the 5 o'clock position or 2 o'clock position, but they have no idea because they've only experienced it even with the Mandela effect shifting, quantum shifting, only at the 10 o'clock position. But we all know that we're in every reality. We're oblivious to it, but we know about it. That's what's important. Because we know that those other replica versions of ourselves that have been sharing our soul since the day we were born are doing exactly what you're doing, and you're doing exactly what they are. For the most part, of course, there's going to be hiccups and glitches.
People call them changes, but they're wrong, because nothing is changing, and that includes the Bible. You're reading a different Bible, not changed.
Obviously. I mean, look at Nelson Mandela. That's perfect namesake for this phenomenon, because we know he doesn't exist in every reality. We know there are some realities where he was a martyr to South Africa, not the president. But it didn't matter. The geopolitical situation in South Africa remains the same regardless of whether he was a martyr or a president.
In Deo's planet, Nelson Mandela never died. On my planet, Nelson Mandela died from pneumonia in prison. This was another clue 10 years ago that I found out that we're coming from different Earths, because his memory does not match my memory.
And that's the Mandela effect for you. Even though there's those hiccups and glitches, the outcome is always going to remain the same, even within our own life. For the most part. Again, I know that's not everybody's typical case. I know mine's not typical. But for every replica version of myself that I've been allowed to enter, coalesce with, that I've always coalesced with on a subconscious level, has been identical to the Dale I remember, where this portion of my soul originated. That's amazing when you think about it. We get to experience this. We know that we're subconsciously tied in constantly to all those other replica versions of ourselves. The science is showing this with this quantum entanglement. Of course, they feel they only understand it when they take a atom and split it, or a proton and split it, that both will act the same. They don't realize yet, I'm sure they're getting close to realizing that already has happened. When our soul was created, it was already splintered and fractured, splintered and fractured, splintered and fractured into, whoever, how long ago that was is irrelevant. The fact is it was created that way. All life has been that way from the very beginning. And that's what the Mandela effect is revealing, and that's what's so awesome about it. But sorry about digressing, but I did want to point out these parts in Australia. There were a couple others. I mentioned the one in the Bay of Bengal here. There's so many more. I always seem to find. I'm going to keep an eye on Greenland because the ice is melting up there too. And who can imagine what that's going to reveal? It's still very interesting about Antarctica down here. They seem to be blotting everything out now. They were showing real amazing things. Like here in these areas, sometimes, see, they start already. But see, you could clearly see there's mountains here and everything. But some of the areas we've been discovering you could see obvious ruins, and they're not natural like those features were. So they're not going to block that one out. But the areas of interest are going to apparently blocking out here. Wow. That's interesting. So yeah, I just wanted to go over some of these other parts. And yeah, we are no doubt in another reality that we've always existed. So really the question is what does this all mean? Why are we being shown this? And why were we never shown this before? That maybe this could be the very first time in all human history that we've been shown what life has been all about from the very beginning, this quantum entanglement. So with that, I thank you for watching.
If anyone has an ear, let him hear.